All right, welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. John Keir and Austin Davidson hosting. And right now we want to bring in a special guest of the podcast, has been on before, most recently last year, previewing the Steelers and Bills matchup for the second time. He's a good friend of mine back from our days at 89.1 The Point in Brockport. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show my good friend Justin Maybach. Justin, how are you doing, my man?
Pretty good. Looking forward to an exciting matchup this weekend.
Yeah, so Steelers and Bills, a game that had a lot of playoff implications last season as they met in Week 15. This year they're meeting in Week 14, and you've got two teams at the top of the AFC picture right now, excluding Kansas City. The Steelers sitting at 11-1, and the Bills at 9-3, and having just a very narrow loss to the Cardinals under their belt could easily be 10-2 at this point as well. So when talking about the Buffalo Bills, a team that's made the playoffs 2 out of the last 3 seasons, they've had one of the biggest reasons for that has been their quarterback play and taking that extra step this year with Josh Allen. And last year he played well at times, not great at other times. This year it's been basically, just to sum it up, a breakout season, hasn't it?
It has been a breakout season, and it was definitely nice to see is that in the beginning of the season, he threw for 300 yards. Jets, first time he had thrown for over 300 yards in his career. And then next week against Miami, he goes over 400 yards. And right out the gate, even without the offseason training program and a preseason this year, like what we get in every other NFL season, the passing game immediately looks better, and Allen comes out of the gate looking like an MVP candidate, which I was not expecting at all, but it was definitely welcome sight.
So with that being the case, what do you think you attribute that to mostly? Do you think it's the consistency and stability that's been seen through the coaching staff? Not a lot of changes there with Brian Dable and obviously head coach oh my goodness, why am I Sean McDermott? I don't know why I was blanking on his name. And of course, you add in a new weapon like Stephon Diggs. All of a sudden, this offense, had some nice pieces last year, but I would imagine that you would say consistency between the coaching staff and then adding a weapon like Diggs has been the biggest reasons for Allen's continued breakout.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. The addition of Diggs changed the dynamic of the passing offense, and we even have a rookie wide receiver who's been coming along nicely in Gabriel Davis, and usually you don't see rookie wide receivers develop very well in Buffalo, but I think the whole dynamic of the passing offense with Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Cole Beasley in the slot, and even Gabe Davis making an impact when he can, it's really nice to see. Then they also have Isaiah McKenzie, who they use every so often, and it's a welcome sight, and especially considering the fact that John Brown is on IR for at least this next game, and then maybe he comes off of it the following week. But the fact that the passing offense hasn't really suffered too much since he left is very nice to see, and it's definitely a testament to their depth and their coaching staff all around.
Indeed. And Davis is actually someone that I kind of wanted to highlight too, because like you mentioned, with John Brown out and on IR for the time being, a guy like Gabriel Davis would have to step up, and he has, at least certainly the last 2 weeks. He's had a touchdown in each of the last 2 weeks. A guy that probably gets lost in the shuffle when you talk about all the great wide receivers that have come out of the draft over the past couple years. Guys like Justin Jefferson and Chase Claypool, to name just a couple. Guys like Davis might get lost in the fray, but he's been very impressive in his own right, and I think that it's important to highlight him going forward. As far as the Bills' pass game goes, we know that they're an explosive, deep down the field attack. The running game, which kind of powered this offense last year, how is that doing this season?
Well, to put it in perspective, it hasn't been anything like last year, in a good way and a bad way. Now, it's in a good way because the Bills have become a pass-first team, basically, with the exception of the game against New England this year in Week 8, where the weather was miserable and passing was necessarily going to be good for either team. And it actually, England, I feel more than it catered to Buffalo, because Buffalo had to adjust and go run first just for that week. They did enough to hold off New England. Devin Singletary in his year isn't necessarily as dominant as last year. And Dak Moss, the rookie that they drafted in the 3rd round out of Utah, has been in and out of the lineup. He missed about 4 to 6 weeks of footing, and then when he came back, he started to make an impact with that New England game when he had 2 rushing touchdowns, although in the Monday night game against San Francisco, twice lost a fumble, and then pretty much was benched the rest of the game. And Single did all the work on the ground. And then they also have Yeldon, TJ Yeldon, that is, but he plays on rare occasion that both of them aren't available. And it's good depth in that area, but essentially the Bills don't necessarily need their run game going all the time. I mean, they'll need it as a supplement to the pass. There have been times when the running backs really haven't been able to get any ground going, but when they can, it is and as long as they can keep the ball, not turn it over, then I can appreciate any running. And you don't get Josh Allen.
Yeah, that seems like the biggest problem with your offense. Like, your offense is really, really good all around, but the one thing I would point out is that the fumbles is huge. 9 fumbles from the year, I believe. I'm sure they're not all from running, but I figure most of them are. But are you concerned about the turnovers? Because that's one bad thing. Your team is really good all around. You guys get the turnovers on defense. You guys have a really good passing offense, which is important in this league. The turnover differential, I honestly just found the stats today. I honestly thought you guys were doing better, because I was like, Josh Allen's playing at such a high level. I knew he wasn't throwing any interceptions. I mean, there's on the year, but that's not a lot. I was surprised to find that you guys had 9 fumbles. Are you concerned about that?
It does concern me when they face a defense that can bring the heat, like Pitt's defense. San Francisco wasn't able to generate a ton of pressure on Allen this past week, and that was a big reason why he had a big game. Now, with Pittsburgh, I'm worried that Josh Allen will not be able to recognize pressure coming from his blind side. That makes me worry that he could lose the ball easily, because one thing I've noticed with Allen is he really doesn't protect the ball well, either when scrambling for yards or in the pocket when he does see a defender coming from behind. The running backs, I think it's just not holding on to the ball well enough. It's not so much that they're getting it stripped, but the turnovers do worry me. The fumbling worries me, regardless of whether or not they lose it. And they have been losing the ball. So it definitely would be concerned if it'd be coming up on Sunday night.
And one of the aspects of Josh Allen and the Bills' offense and their explosiveness, as you might be able to surmise, is the fact that they hit the ball, get these deep shots down the field. A lot of it is Josh Allen extending the play, and that's going to require him to hold on to the football. And if I'm the Steelers' defense, I'm focusing on trying to take away Stephon Diggs if I can. I'm trying to put pressure on Allen without having to blitz as much as I can. A group of players on the Buffalo Bills that I think is kind of maybe not forgotten, but maybe a little underrated in the general sense, is probably the tight end group. There's 3 solid tight ends with this group, and Dawson Knox, Tyler Kroft, and Lee Smith. I know Knox has been hurt most of the year, but he had a solid rookie season last year. The Steelers should be familiar with Kroft from his work with the Cincinnati Bengals over the past few seasons. And Lee Smith, the guy just doesn't go away. He's one of the best blocking tight ends in the league. And I know Austin would agree with me that when it comes to the Steelers' ground game, we've really struggled running the ball, and we'd love to have a guy like Lee Smith right about now. So I was curious if you could tell us a little bit about the tight end group and their impact on the Buffalo Bills so far.
Well, if there's one thing I'll say, it's that Dawson Knox has looked better the last 2 games, because up until the Chargers game, he really hadn't made as much of an impact. Whenever he was given opportunity, he would have dropped the ball when it was thrown his way. or he would fumble, or he would miss blocks. And it was getting to the point where fans were getting fed up with him and calling him a bust. And I think that there's still potential with Knox. I feel like he's just going through some growing pains, even as a second-year guy. And everybody wants to see all the skilled players making an impact the minute that they're in the lineup. And I think Knox, it's taking a little bit more time. Tyler Kroft, I've been impressed with, although he hasn't been playing as of lately. They've been playing Lee Smith was actually inactive for a good amount of games this year, and I believe that's a testament to the coaching staff's ability to recognize key matchups and where players are going to do better in certain areas, and having Lee Smith in the blocking scenarios is definitely helpful. So I trust that the coaching staff, when one tight end is active over another, then it's because they have the capability of recognizing better matchups in that instance.
So looking at the other side of the ball, while the Bills' offense has broken out and has become one of the better units in the NFL in an offensive-driven league, the defense, which had been improving for years and was honestly a top 5, if not a top 3 unit last season, kind of fell back to the pack. They had a really rough start to the year. They've kind of rebounded a little bit here lately, so maybe around the middle of the pack right now, statistically speaking. What happened to this Buffalo Bills defensive unit, and can you explain why they struggled so much early?
I think I can give a lot of reasons as far as why it hasn't been as good of a year for the defense. So first of all, they lost one of their backers in Lorenzo Alexander to retirement. That was not related to COVID at all. That was just because he had made this decision before the end of the regular season last year. The Bills knew that he would be leaving after the 2019 season. They lost Star Lutule, one of them in the line, to an opt. They lost a potential depth cornerback in EJ Kane, who had been in and off the roster over the last few years, played mainly in 2017. They intended on bringing him back in 2019, but he got injured in the preseason. The season was lost. He ended out, might have been a good depth piece. But then also losing your edge rusher in Shaq Moss in Miami. You lose Jordan Phillips to the Cardinals. Both were free agent losses. So the loss of all those guys definitely made an impact. I would say that because the offenses that they're playing are much better than what they saw last year, because guys know to necessarily target in the direction of Tre'Davious White. That's why you haven't seen him making necessarily as many big plays as last year, because now quarterbacks know not to throw in his direction and to go target for Trey White. Mainly, it's just a combination of, and also there's been injuries as well. There was a week where the Bills lost Levi Wallace and Josh Norman due to COVID-19 related reasons, and they did rely on University of Pittsburgh Dane Jackson that week and against the Jets earlier in the year, and he had a good impression of himself. What I will say about the defense is that they are good situationally. They have the most fourth quarter takeaways in the league this year, and they know when to make the plays. They aren't as dynamic when it comes to trying to score. Like, they actually have a drought that dates back to 2017 as far as when the last time the Bills scored was.
Oh wow!
Jeez, that's a really long time. Was that against New York Jets?
That was actually against the New England Patriots. Jordan Poyer, who had a pick six of Tom Brady. Jordan Poyer is still there, and it was the same defense that McDermott and Leslie Frazier were coaching. It's just for whatever reason the Bills get takeaways usually in the opposing team red zone, so they'll get at alt drives right as other teams are looking to go and score. And Tre'Davious White has come close. Matt Milano tried last week against San Francisco, but they never seem to get that lane and all that blocking to get in. Meanwhile, I've seen the Steelers do it seemingly week after week, like Minka Fitzpatrick, Joe Hayden. Like it seems easy for them.
Yeah, that's
It used to be rare. It really used to feel rare when we had Artie Burns and stuff. It felt like that stuff never happened. It's so weird now because of where we're at. It's just touch on what you said. It's kind of crazy because your offense is the exact opposite. I was watching the Bills game last week, 2 weeks ago, and they're jinxing Josh Allen on live air, and they said he hasn't thrown a red zone interception yet. And so awesome that you guys, your defense is one of the best at taking away in the red zone, and then your offense just doesn't turn it over. That's a P for winning.
Yeah, I would agree. And the fact he still has yet to throw zone is pretty awesome to know about. Like, I mean, there's all these statistics with Josh Allen that really come off as pretty phenomenal. Like the fact he still hasn't thrown a red zone interception, the fact that he's up there top quarterbacks as far as fourth quarter game-winning drives and comebacks in general. The fact that, you know, he is being compared as it is right now to a younger Big Ben is something that he's taken a lot of pride in, and it's something that if that really is to be true, you know, then for a very good career. Of course, obviously, it would be nice to attain this high consistency as far as his top performances are concerned on a week-to-week basis, because you go to some of his bad teams this year and they looked pretty bad, and it's like, can we just get, you know, and that was playing at an MVP level earlier in the season and then within this past week or so.
Could you like kind of like lean in for us and kind of like just whisper to us, you know, what's the worst part of this Buffalo Bills defense? What is, you know, if you're looking at for the Steelers as far as what they're looking at, what do you think is the part of the defense that the Steelers are going to look at and say, in order for us to win, this is what we have to attack on Sunday?
Well, mainly the weakest part of the defense this year has been stopping the run. And I heard that against the Chiefs back in October, they gave up over 200 yards run to their rookie Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And against San Francisco last week with all of their weapons, I thought that was going to be a big issue, but they actually did a decent job for what it's worth. They don't necessarily stack the box, but
you know,
have been better at addressing the run but overall this year, run has definitely been weaker than pass defense. And if the Steelers want to try and attack the Bills, then they're going to need to get the run game going with Connor and Snell. And I know that as of lately, that's been an issue. Team just hasn't really bothered to try running as much as passing.
Yeah,
It's
you know,
interesting.
it sounds to me like it's a matchup of the resistible force and the movable object. So, I mean, I'm curious, how's Ed Oliver playing? That was a guy coming out that got comparisons, not like exactly to Aaron Donald, but he was kind of a similar build, a guy that scouts seemed to think was going to be the real deal. And he's not putting up eye-popping stats, but, I mean, he's not, as far as I can tell, he's not a bad player. I mean, how is Ed Oliver? Is he lived up to the hype so far, or is he disappointed a little? Or is he somewhere in between?
I would honestly say somewhere in between. I mean, his name isn't going to be the one that pops up like Aaron Donald. I mean, granted, let's be honest. No, like Aaron Donald is probably like just better than the next best guy at his position. I mean,
he's on another stratosphere right now. I mean, it's just him and then everyone else.
Yeah. I think, honestly, Ed Oliver's impact on the defense right now is probably in an area that you won't hear about as much. But, I mean, obviously, he is it's only the second year with the team. I honestly wouldn't be giving up on him right away. I mean, every once in a while he'll make that big play, but year hasn't necessarily been as eye-popping, and I think that the defense will try. I think that the defensive coaching staff will try and work with him to address whatever issues he may have. But for what it's worth, I mean, if he can start making more big plays, I would say that the investment of a top draft pick in him was worth it in the end. But we'll see. I mean, time will tell.
In the
So
49ers game, he had a nice take on. He was blocked by two guys, and he was able to get penetration. So definitely he can perform at a really high level. He can definitely live up to his, I believe, 14 overall, right? 14th?
I believe it was 8th or 9th.
8th or 9th. That was a little bit too high. Too low.
He was drafted right before the Steelers drafted Devin Bush.
oh, so pick
okay.
number 9.
Yeah.
Pick number 9 then.
Yeah, so he's definitely can lived up to it. He showed in that 49ers game, I saw that, and Baldy did a breakdown on it. That's why I really know about it, but I think that Ed Oliver can definitely be a guy that lives up to that 9th overall pick potential. And I've seen it before.
Absolutely. And they also have a promising young rookie in AJ Epinesa that has been in and out of the lineup, but has made an impact at times when given. I like what I see from him as well.
Complete side note, I didn't realize Jerry Hughes had been in the league. This is his 11th season now. I mean, wow. I feel like he's still a young guy, but he's been there a long time now.
That's correct. He has been with the team since 2013. The only other guy on the roster that has been with the Bills other than the current regime of Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane would be Jerry Hughes and Reed Ferguson.
Huh. That's definitely not a name I would have figured, but that's go figure, I guess.
Yeah.
I forgot. John Feliciano is he's been dealing with injuries all year. I know he was limited earlier this week, but it looks like he should be back. Bills offensive line, real quick. Where's this unit as a whole this year?
Yeah. Losing Cody Ford been? Has the guy behind him stepped up? I honestly would love to hear about that because who's starting at tackle now that Cody Ford is out.
Yeah, so the offensive line this year has been kind of interesting, to say the least. Not necessarily that, but it hasn't necessarily been what the coaching staff intended for. Hard to believe the coaching staff intended for a starting offensive line that hasn't played together as a unit all season and actually will not get the chance because right before Cody Ford was set, he suffered injury in practice that took him out the rest of the year.
Ooh.
So as an offensive, their idea of an offensive line this year consisted of Deion Dawkins, John Feliciano, Mitch Morse, Darrell Williams, and Cody Ford. Of course, that never all came together. But also on the offensive line, who they brought over from the New York Jets, who was initially signed because of the initial injury that John Feliciano had that took him out the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season. Cody Ford made a good of himself last year as a rookie, so he had been earning more playing time. It's unfortunate, but now he's done for the Ike Bucker is another guy that they mix in every so often. They had Quentin Spain, who was not necessarily playing that well earlier in the year, so they moved on from him. On the offensive line, I'm a big fan of Morris when he's healthy and not dealing with another issue. And Feliciano, honestly, I think when he returned against New England in Week 8, you really saw the impact the running game had with him in the lineup. And I know he got hurt again for the Niners game, but I don't think it's an injury that will keep him out this weekend against Birds. With him playing the offensive line, it looks completely different. And even though they won't get their ideal offensive line together one time this year, I think it's definitely something that Bills fans can agree much more we had in 2019 and before that.
So I got one last general question here. With Tre'Davious White, who I have made no secret about over the last few years, he was one of my favorite players coming out of the draft in 2017. I think he's had a really great career thus far. Has, according to PFF, given up 4 touchdowns this year, but is still grading really well. He's had some tough assignments with guys like DeAndre Hopkins and DK Metcalf and Tyreek Hill. So it hasn't been an easy season for him, so maybe that's understandable. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he's still a shutdown guy. So, I guess my question to you, Justin, is who do you think that the Bills are going to try to travel him against one of the Steelers receivers, or do you think that they're just going to have him stay on one side and whoever he goes up against will just shut it down?
I could see them doing the travel option or potentially moving him around, but probably going to be based on what they're seeing in the Steelers from the get-go tomorrow night. What I will say is the Steelers wide receiver core definitely looks better than what the Bills went up against last year against the Steelers in Pittsburgh when they didn't have Claypool yet and Juju Smith hurt for that game. So they were going up mainly against Washington and Deontay Johnson. And then also I noticed that the Steelers have been utilizing Ray McLeod a lot, not necessarily in the receiving game, but as a punt returner and initially with Buffalo.
Yeah, one that's interesting that you mentioned that the former Bill Ray McLeod. He's been utilized a little bit on offense. One thing that they had been using him for, he had a long, 60-yard run against the Philadelphia Eagles earlier this season. That's one aspect of the Steelers' offense, motion, jet sweep, stuff like that they ran early in the year, but they have not run late. So I wonder if we'll see a little bit more of that, but I wonder for the time being. Any further questions, Austin?
I think I'm pretty good.
Alrighty then, Justin. A couple things here to close out. Number one, can you give us one particular matchup, whether it's receiver versus cornerback or a group of linebackers versus running backs, or is it a third down offense versus third down defense? What's one thing that you're looking forward to, one matchup you're looking forward to in this game?
Well, good question, because honestly, I think that there are a couple good matchups to point out. But if I had to pick one, it would probably be based off of what the cornerbacks and safeties for the Steelers try to do to contain Stephon Diggs, whether or not they put one specific guy on him. And the game is a little bit rough because of losing Joe Hayden, and obviously there's not as much of a to pass rush because of Bud Dupree being out for the year, which is unfortunate. But I would basically be most interested in the matchup regarding Zion.
Alrighty then. And then to close out, Justin, could you please give us, kind of your brief rundown of thoughts about this game going into it, just kind of how you think both teams are going to do and what you ultimately think the final score will be.
Well, definitely wish that the Steelers were still undefeated heading into this game, because hard to believe that the last time the Bills had a home Sunday night game was against the New England Patriots in 2007 when they ended up going 16-0, and I know that's something that a lot of Steelers fans wish could have happened. Obviously, it didn't get to that point, and unfortunately, the Washington football team had to come in and beat Pittsburgh before that game. But now that actually makes me a little bit about how the Steelers will approach this game now, knowing that they are well enough to win games all the time every week. They don't feel as invincible as they probably felt before losing to Washington. But still, this is going to be an exciting matchup. I mean, I was reading about how it's the first Sunday night matchup like this with the two teams playing each other have by a winning percentage this high in December or January ever, basically, because the combined record would come down to 20-4 or 22-4 if I have that correct. 20-4, I think. Ultimately, I feel like the Steelers haven't had adversity this year as the Bills, basically because of their easier schedule that they have playing the NFC East and the NFC South. So I will take the Bills in a very close game. My score prediction would be 28-24. I don't think the Bills get over 30 points like they did last week. And I hope that the Steelers will make it challenging and be surprised if it comes down to the final few minutes. And unlike last year, I do not see the Bills coming close to scoring a defensive touchdown, because I remember predicting Detroit would have a pick six. I actually was almost correct, but I think that make it close. I think they can come out on top, not by a lot, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Pittsburgh gets back in the win column.
Should be a lot of fun, and yeah, I think you're right, Justin. I think that this game has a lot more of a chance to end up as a higher scoring shootout as opposed to last year's game, which was I believe a 17-10 game. You might be able to confirm or deny that for me.
Nope, that's correct. 17-10 was the final score, and the Bills struggled offensively, but to get 4 picks from Duck Hodges.
Duck, oh man, good times. But it should be a lot of fun, and I'm glad that the Steelers and Bills get a chance to play for the second time in as many years. In fact, going back since they've realigned the divisions, the Steelers and Bills have not played more than once every 3 years because of the way the schedules line up, and because of the fact that the Steelers and Bills never finished in the same spot in their division. So they've only played just a handful of times. In fact, the last time they played in Buffalo was a game that Austin and I actually attended, the game where Le'Veon Bell had a massive day. Weird to think how much has changed since that time, but it should be a lot of fun. And Justin, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us again. And to be quite honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the first of maybe 2 times we have you on the show, because I certainly would not be surprised if these 2 teams met up in the playoffs later this year.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised either, but they're guaranteed to play next year regardless if they each win their divisions again, and then they would play again in 2022 based on the fact that the entire of the AFC North. I will say both of those games would actually take place in Buffalo, and I know that it's a to the game this year because of the coronavirus pandemic. I was really looking forward to being able to be at that game, but next year, as long as they play each other again, and somehow if fans were able to go some capacity next year, which I think there's a good chance that could happen, it would be nice if we could definitely out.
Absolutely. I was actually just thinking about that too. Like, man, if all this wasn't happening, I'd probably be at the game tomorrow. But such is the life we are currently living in right now. Hopefully we don't have to go too much longer with the things as they are. But in the meantime, Justin, thank you so much for joining us. And if anyone wants to get out there and see Justin's thoughts, I don't know how often you tweet, Justin. I know you do sometimes, but you want to give our anyone listening your Twitter handle if you want any of our followers to check out and see what you're thinking about the game?
My Twitter account, Justin Maybach 24.
Alrighty. Well, Justin, until next time, thank you for joining us on the Stronger Than Steel podcast, and enjoy the game tomorrow.
Thank you. Same to both of you.
Enjoy, man. Thanks for coming on.
All right, take care, buddy.
Yep, pleasure. Thanks. Goodbye.